Alright, so this is just a quick tutorial today on storyboarding and page setup, and how we do like nice cartoon cutouts here of people and how you set your storyboard up. Also, we'll talk a little bit about the Sabi project, of how you can do some quick storyboarding for the Sabi, and we'll have a look at doing that as well. And that's mostly going to be important in relation to if you don't have a model to actually use in a storyboard situation in Sabi. What you can use is a bit of blue foam or something else in the hand as your pillbox, and then we can Photoshop over the top of that and create a sort of fake Sabi product. So we'll have a look at doing that as well. So we'll just move forward quite quickly with it, and so it's nice and snappy. So open up Photoshop, and we'll do the same thing as we did before, and we'll probably set up a new page, and we'll probably set up a new page in around A3, and we'll do it. It's set to 300 dots per inch. That's probably a good size to do it. So we go to A3, 300 pixels per inch, and we'll click OK. And remember, we'll go image rotation in image here, 90 degrees clockwise. Now, in terms of your strip and border, it depends what you're doing. You might just have your logo that you put in the bottom. This time you might use the same strip that you used before. It just depends on the balance of how you want to do your work. It's really down to you to make a professional judgment on that. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at some of the images. We'll go File, Open, and we'll go to here. We've got Shot Setups, and we'll have a look. These are the images that I took before in relation to storyboarding out the sort of boiling of the kettle situation. So first of all, we'll do the cutout of me at the end here. Right. So ideally, what you want to do is with the storyboarding, you want to kind of have a few things going on. You want to kind of have the person in the image, which is kind of cut out, and you want to have that as a white person with a black outline, or you want to have it as a sort of slightly cartooned image. You could have it in a way where you just have the person which is coloured with the white background, or you could keep the background in. Whatever way you do it, the product really needs to stay the product. So if this was a product in the hand, that should really stay true, and the cartoony part should be sort of like faded out a bit or coloured in. So it's really about the product, but this just adds context. And the way that we really do it is we basically trace the outline of the person first. I'm probably not going to use all of this image because there's too much of it. So I think we'll go to this page first, and we'll think about how we're going to set up our storyboards. Now I've got 8 images that talk me through each stage of the storyboarding. So I'll go to View and turn on the rulers like this. And like I said before, sort of put some rulers around the edge about 5mm. You can measure them correctly if you want. I'm just going to drop them on there as a guide like this, and that'll just give me a boundary to work within. Now rulers are really good because you can line the page up nicely. Now if I've got 8 images, if you grab a ruler and bring it in, that should naturally find the centre there. It sort of locks in. See that? It jumps in. So I know where the middle is. So now I need 2 images here, 2 images there. I'm going to need 2 at the top and the bottom. So for now I'll just divide it equally. So I'm going to want 2 in here, 2 in here, 2 in here, and 2 in here. Right. So I can play around with that at some point. I can drop a line in between those 2 again, about maybe 1 here and 1 here. So I know that if I was going to measure out the size of the boxes that are going to fit the images in, they're going to need to fit in around this sort of space. So what I'll do is I'll work out what size that box will be, and I'll go to the marquee tool here, and I can draw in a shape. I can make it long, I can make it thin, I can make it tall. I can hold down Shift and it'll keep it in proportion. So on this instance, I'll just keep it in proportion. I'm going to make it slightly smaller because I'm going to want a bit of space between each of them on the page. So I don't want it overcrowded too much. So I reckon about there is fine. So remember what we did before. You go to new layers, and you're going to fill in this layer with a colour. It doesn't matter what colour. It's basically just so it gives it an entity. It's an actual shape. And we go to File, Edit, Copy. You're copying this layer, and if we go, and now you can paste that and create another layer, or if we go to File, New, it keeps those dimensions in the temporary memory, right? So this at 1063 pixels by 1063, click OK, and that creates a new layer. Now this is going to be our sort of square block that we're going to use for our images. So we can go back in here, we can delete that, we can chuck that away, we don't need it. And if these pixels are still there, you can go to Select and Deselect. Right, they've gone away. Don't forget to save your work. Go to File, Save, and we're going to save this as storyboard. Right, click OK, and just make it sure it has saved. Yeah, because save is greyed out. Okay, so that's all good. Right, we'll go back to this. If I get my photograph now and drag that into this blocks, right, I can kind of get an idea sort of where the composition of the image needs to be. If you can have a look, the image doesn't come in very big, and that's because the pixel size of this is set up at around 300 pixels per inch. And if I'd set that board up at 200 pixels per inch, a little bit smaller, and created that box, that image would have come in much larger. But as it is, you know, it will probably do. I don't really like making images bigger than what they need to be. So actually, if we'll delete that, and I'll just show you the difference. If I actually set this board up at 200 instead, right? So I've just reduced the quality slightly. It makes it easy to work with. There's less memory in Photoshop actually. You use up less memory if there's less pixels. We'll make the same size box again. Right, we'll do the same procedure, new layer, and then we'll copy that in, and we'll file new, and we'll paste that in, make a new layer. That's the layer we'll use. We'll get rid of this, deselect that, Control D will deselect, and then we'll grab this in now, because it's got less pixels in this box. This is coming much bigger, you see, like that. So now I can I don't have to overstretch the photograph to get to make it where I want. In fact, if anything, I can make it smaller. Now, if you're going to adjust the images, don't forget what I said. You need to make it convert it to a smart object. That's if you intend to resize it again later. If you don't, you can leave it as it is. I don't. So I can Control T, or I can go to Edit, Transform, and hold down Shift to keep it in proportion, which I'm not doing. And then you can sort of work out where it needs to be, like that. I don't intend to make this any bigger than what this is, so we'll keep it to there. Tracing images is good when you do have a high resolution, because it means you can get in quite closely. I think that will do. That's enough context. Right, that's all grand. Now, what we can do to make sure that image stays that size, we can crop this. So all this information, we still have the rest of the photograph, which is kind of hidden at the minute. So we can go to the crop tool, and it automatically selects this. I can change where I want it to crop if I want to there, which I don't. I basically want to keep this size, so I click enter and enter again, and that should have cropped that down. So if we bring that out, yeah, so it's cut that image down to that exact size, right? It's exactly what we want. So that's all good. Now I'm going to zoom in. I want to trace this very quickly. Now, there's a couple of things. I want to trace this really nicely. I'm going to have a line trace as one layer. So this is the image. So I'm going to choose this as image layer. Right, that's the image layer. And then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this outline. Right, so that's the outline layer. I'm going to have a background image because I want to use me as color. And I'm going to change the color, but I also want to have the background, so they actually need to be separate images. So I'm going to duplicate this image by dragging it into the new layer box and let go, and it will copy it. So I've basically got a copy of that now. So I can double click that, and I can call this background. And what we'll do is we'll fade that out later on. So now I'm going to have a background and a color here. What else do we need? And we'll probably have to have a layer for the cup to keep the cup normal. So we'll copy the background layer and we'll call that cup. So now I've really got all the layers I need. I've got the image layer, which is going to be me, which we're going to colour. I've got the background layer, which is going to be this bit here. We're going to keep that in. I've got the cup, because the cup's going to be remaining, and I've got the outline, which I'm going to outline here. So next thing is we choose outline, and we go to brush. And at the minute all the settings are off because I was painting with this before, so I want the flow to be 100%, I want the opacity to be 100%, and I want the brush style to be 100% hard, right, like okay. Otherwise it will be a fuzzy edge. And if you hit the capital lock, you can toggle between a crosshair and at the actual size of the brush. And what I want to do is make sure that the pen settings are correct. So at the minute I'm using a tablet, so if I start to sketch here, if I push down harder, you can create a thicker line, and if I put down slowly, it'll create a thinner line, like that, right? So it depends how you want to do it. I actually quite like working with pen pressure, it's quite nice. You want to make sure that your spacing is set to 1% here, otherwise you'll get like a dotted line like this when you're drawing. You want to keep that at 1%. And shape dynamics, pen pressure's on, that's good. Yeah, that's all grand. We'll keep that as it is. So we'll close it, and then your brush settings are in there. Black is the colour that we're going to want for the outline. If you're finding that your tablet is a little bit too sensitive, you can change the sensitivity of the tablet. I'm trying to remember where that is in here. I think that is going to be in Wacom settings. No, it's going to be difficult. I can't remember where it is. It doesn't really matter. So we'll forget it. Don't forget, when you hold down your spacebar, you can actually move that around. You can move the image around, and you can hide your layers there as well. So we're going to go to brush. It's going to be set on black. We'll see that the line thickness is light at the minute. That's way too big. So we're going to bring the brush size down. Now you can change the brush size automatically with the keyboard. There's the bracket keys. There's like an open bracket and closed bracket, or there's an open parentheses, closed parentheses. That's next to the enter button or the return button. It tends to be just below the plus and equals button. So that if you use those brackets, you can actually like move the brush up and down, right? So let's bring the brush size down a bit smaller. This might be a little bit jumpy because I'm using a recording software at the minute on the Apple, and although it's a good computer, it's still quite slow. So we'll just do a nice sort of solid outline of me here. I'm not going to like worry about it too much. I tend to have a thicker line on the outside and then a thinner line on the inside. So we'll just trace this really quickly. It is actually a lot easier when you're using a pen tablet than when you're using a mouse. And actually the quality of what I'm going to do here isn't going to be very good because I'm going to rush it to actually sort of show you how to do this quickly. So, you know, don't look at this work and think, oh, that's the kind of quality that I want. It's not. I actually want you to spend quite a bit of time getting this right, ideally. You know, because if you do spend your time on these and get these looking nice, they do pay off. It will separate your work out against other people's work. Now, when you've kind of done the outline, you want to come to like creases and folds like this. This is where a pen tablet's quite nice because you can kind of like do fainted lines. You can sort of fade the lines out a little bit and make them a little bit thinner. And that adds a little bit of a cartoony kind of look to it, which is quite nice. And really what you want to be doing is, by the time you finish doing this, you should be able to understand what the character is. So you want to trace the fingers a little bit, things like that. And you want to trace the edge of the cup. And you've got to make sure that the lines are really nicely closed off. So you don't want any lines which are kind of like half done. You want to make sure they're all nice and closed. And we'll come under here. So I'll do the jacket and put a bit of a jiggle on the zip. That's nice. Little details on your face. You don't need to do too much. You can just do like a little bit for the eyes. It's not that important really. You just need to play around and find what works really. But much easier with a tablet than it is with a mouse. And the hair, just sort of like, you know, do it really quickly. I'll do. What's really important is no breaks in this line all the way around, because when you come to actually select the inside or the outside of the lines, if there's any gaps in it, the selections will start to go inside the drawing, and that's when you have complications with your selections. So when you're using the cutout tools, if you're going to get a nice solid cutout, you want to make sure that all this line is completely closed off. So it is actually quite quick to do if you look. It's not actually that difficult. Now the nice thing about doing storyboards is you can use white, a pure white effect, or you can use a cutout effect. There's loads of other filters in Photoshop which you can play around with. There's some new ones in there which are more orientated towards like sketching. There's like sketching filters, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. So, you know, a lot of Photoshop really is just playing around with the settings and just seeing what you get out of it. There are some really nice things. I made this one up myself, this cutout. A lot of the other lads at uni used to just use black and white traces for people for storyboards. You see it all the time. It's boring. You don't really want to be producing work that other people are doing. You want to do something which is unique to you. Otherwise you just have the same portfolio as everyone else, and that really never really gets anybody anywhere, does it? So, you know, try and refrain from doing things like that. So yeah, I think that's about right. That'll probably do. The way you can tell, if you zoom out a little bit, so we'll come back here. Right, so it's really roughly done, and to be honest, if I was doing this professionally, I would have spent about half an hour doing this. But if you turn everything else off, you should just be able to see the basic outline here, which will do. Now, I can check that quite quickly. There's a little bit here where the line might be broken, so I need to go in there and just fix that up a little bit, make sure it's not, otherwise the line trace won't work. The hair's not too good in here. You can always fix that by going into the eraser, changing the setting, making it hard brush, using your keypad to make it smaller, and you can just jiggle that around a little bit in there. Good. Right, next step is we're going to use this outline as a guide for the cut of the rest of the drawing. So what we want to do, if you remember before, we want to have an image which is going to be me, we want to have a background which is separate, and we're going to have the cut. So we need to use this line to cut 3 times. And basically this line is like a template we're going to use to cut with. So first of all, we're going to cut me out. So we're going to go to the image layer, and we're going to use the selection tool, and we put it on 100% tolerance, which means it's very, very high, and it will really dig deeply into the lines. So we select that, and what that does now is that's selected all of the way around the outside of the black line. Now what we want to do is we want to actually come into the line slightly, because when we cut it out, what we don't want is like a bit of a blur of around the edge of this image. If you take the outline off, where the image meets the background, you'll see like a little bit of a furring. We want to get rid of that. So the way we do that is we cut from inside the line. Now to cut the outside out, what we need to do is we need to expand this line slightly so it comes into the black. And we do that by going to Select, Modify and Expand. And we'll just choose 1 pixel now, see how that goes. If you watch how it moves, see how it jumped in a little bit there? Now I don't think that's too bad actually, so I'll probably keep that as it is, but as long as you're cutting inside of the black line, when you actually cut the image out, if you go to Image now, and we go Edit, and we go Cut, and cut that away, it's cutting from inside the black lines. The black line is covering the cut actually, almost, so when you look at it visually, you don't see a bad edge, you just see a nice black line in the image, right? So we'll zoom out a little bit, right, so that's me cut out. Now, in theory, on some storyboards, you could leave it like that, in terms of the background not being there. But what we're going to do with me is we're going to change the way the guy looks inside. So what we need to do again, this is one image here. Now, if you hold down let's have a look, no, it's the function key. Yeah, if you hold down the command button over the layer, like that, can you see the little box that's popping up there? If you hold that down and click on it, it will select that layer. It selects everything in that layer, right? That's kind of exactly the same really as me using the selection tool, right, and selecting the outside of this image and then just go and select inverse, because then it will select everything inside, right? But basically what I'm doing is, because that's an image that I've cut out, that's the only thing that exists is that bit of colour here. I can hold down command and that just means it's going to select all of it. Now I can go to my filters, right? I'm going to change the way this looks. So I'll go to my filters and I go to filter gallery, and in filter gallery there is one called cutout, which is already pre-selected. And what you can do is you can play around with the levels here in terms of how cartoony that gets. Number of levels down here, number 2 makes it very blocky, number 7 is more detailed. So basically just play around with it till you find one that kind of works all right. I tend to go for ones that have like nice contrasting colours like that, and then try and make it less clear. So let's have a look. That's too much. Yeah, that's not too bad. That's kind of alright actually. That's too realistic. I don't like it when it looks realistic. It's nice when it's kind of just a bit like you kind of coloured it in yourself, which you can do. 5 or 6. We'll go for that one. Right, well, yeah, we'll use that. Right, that'll do. So click OK, and that'll change that around. So now if you turn the outline off, what you've got is basically the cutout of me there that's been messed about in the filter. You can turn the outline on. What you could do is you could actually like change the opacity of that inside there, like this, to sort of fade that out so the outline is stronger. In order to do that, you'd need to have a white layer behind that when you put the other image back in. But we'll just keep that solid for now. We'll deselect it. So that's the cutout. Quite basic, quite quick. And now we want to do the background. So at the minute, the background is on top of this. So we're going to put the background and drag it below that image. Right. So now the background is here. And then we can turn the opacity of the background down. So we can fade the background out a little bit like this, so it's not as prominent. Okay, like that. And now if we turn on the cup, now we want to get rid of everything else in this image here. So we go back to the outline, we can select everything on the outside of the outline like this. We go back to the cup image and we can go Control X, cut that away. And then what we really need to do is we just need to delete the rest of this image. So an easy way of doing that is just go to the eraser, make it quite big, and just delete it out. Like that. I've turned off the black line just to make it easier to see what I'm doing. Like this. Like that. If you hold down Shift when you're using a brush, you can actually do straight lines with it. So I can click here and then hold down Shift, and then when I click the mouse again, it will just draw a straight line like that. That'll probably do for now. Yeah, that'll probably do. It's messy because I've done it quick, but I think, you know, as a first pass in 5 minutes, it's not too bad. Right, so that's kind of it. Now, if I wanted just to have that as a white on the inside without a cutout, if I just wanted that to be white, I'll go back to the outline again. We create a new layer and we'll call this white. Like that. Put it below the outline because we want that to be lower. Go back to the outline and we'll select the inside of the, oh, actually no, we'll select the outside. Then we go to select inverse, so we're turning those pixels inwards. So now what we're going to do is going to fill in everything within the pixels that are here. So we can modify, we can contract it a little bit, make it smaller. And then if we get the paint bucket and choose a colour, we'll choose white. Go back to the white layer and we just click that there, it'll just fill it. Deselect. And we'll zoom back out a little bit. And there's an alternative. If we want to bring the cup back in, we just erase the bit of the white. See what I mean? Like that. And then we can have the product back as a solid again, and now we've just got like a nice white colour for the person. Just makes it a bit more discreet. And obviously you can turn off the background as well, you know. Depends how you want to do it. It's really down to you. It's a storyboard. It's really just about showing the product and situation. Okay, so we're going to go for this one like that. And if I want to save that, what I'll do is go to Layer, Flatten Image. Right, so that flattens everything down. Done. And then when I drag this back into the storyboard, that will come in at the size that we set up originally. Right. Now, in terms of making that having a little border around the outside, I will double click on it and open up the stroke, which is here. And then I can change the stroke. I can make it like 8, so it's nice and black. I can change the colour of it. I might make it a grey, maybe a red, because that will go against the colours in my jacket. So you can make it nice and red. No, it doesn't really work actually. Let's try blue. Yeah, I don't even like that either. So we'll just go for grey. Yeah, that's alright. Okay, so that's one. Now, ideally, you'd kind of really work your way through with the rest of the images. Now, you kind of we can get rid of this and close that down to save memory. And in here, we can use this square now for the rest of the images. What you want to be thinking about mostly is when you're taking your storyboard pictures, you've got to think of them as a sequence. You really need to be sort of focusing on your work through in terms of how you're actually going to sell these shots. So each one of these shots has to be like a product shot almost that we did the other week, where each scene is set up in a way that sells the product. You just do it as a storyboard. So you really want to think about this very clearly when you're talking about your Sabi projects or you're doing your storyboard for this. You can do anything at home with 4 or 6 stages, but with your Sabi project, you really want to think very clearly about how your pillbox works, what it does, how it's perceived, how people use it, how you want people to use it. So really, when you've done that and you've taken all your pictures, you just basically will bring in this, let's say we bring this image here, right? Open this one up. Right, so there's a couple of things. I've kind of set this up quite nicely, so I've really sort of focused in on the image. Now, when you're doing product shots, the way your eye works is your eye tends to focus on certain points of the board. It tends to focus within these 4 points of the squares. So your eye naturally breaks up information into this grid, and it tends to focus here, 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 and here. This is the peripheral, but this is where you tend to look, and also you tend to read things from left to right. So I tend to make sure that in my product shots, like we did the other day, that there's a nice balance of things in the page. If you look at the speakers on the images there's a speaker on the right, there's a speaker on the left, because I'm sort of taking into consideration the way that this frames things in your eye. Now the main things in image here are the morning roast, because it's the coffee, the percolator and the cup. And if you have a look at the way I've kind of visually set that up with my camera, I've sort of instinctively sort of balanced them all out within this sort of space. It's pretty obvious when you think about it, but then again you need to sort of remember it in case you're not. But everything has to kind of be lined up like this. All this other stuff in the background is basically just contextual. It just makes it look like a kitchen that's being used. There's nothing in this product shot I didn't want there. I even put the apple in there just to kind of soften it a little bit, so we'll make it look a bit more homely. You know, I made this up in 2 minutes. If I was doing this for real, I'd probably spend a bit more time in terms of what I put in. But there should be nothing in your product shots or your storyboards that does not need to be there to set up the context of what it is you're trying to show. So every single thing, the lighting, the angle, all those bits and pieces, right? So you take your product shots in your stages, you take them all the way through that shows each physical stage of using your product. Drag that back into the cube that you set up before. This is where you might not necessarily use a cube, you might use a rectangle, something smaller. Change the size of it using free transform or transform by hitting Control T or going to the edit button up there. I'm going to use that much of the image. Or maybe even let's make it a bit bigger, so we just overdo it a little bit. So we'll just use this for now, that's alright. in terms of the image itself, it might need tidying up in terms of colours. So you want to go to Image, Adjustments and Levels. Like I said before, the black controls the black, the white controls the white. At the minute it's a little bit grey. Where this sort of graph begins is where it's starting to pick up white. This is where it's beginning to pick up black. So at the minute it's sort of saying that it's lacking white on the page, it's a bit greyed out, so we're going to grab that and we're going to drag it to about here. So it's subtle, but you can see a change, right, in terms of it's sort of sharpened that up. It's added a bit of contrast to it. So we're going to pull the blacks in as well, just a little bit, and then pick the white a bit more. And if you look at that, that's quite a greyed out, that's a bit more punchy, right? And it makes a big difference when you print your work out. We'll click OK. And we'll probably bring that in a bit more actually, because that's a little bit, there we go. So once I'm happy with it, I'll go to Layer, Flatten Image, so it flattens that off, and then I can grab that and drag that into my board, like this, right? Now, you do that with the rest of your images. You go to File, Open, find the next image, which is this one, open that, bring that in, and you might do the same thing again. You go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, bring up the whites, bring in the blacks, add a bit more contrast. When you're happy with it, drag that into your cube, drop it into the cube, find the bit that works about here. Now you might storyboard this out, you might then trace the product in a black line, you might trace the hand and you might cartoon the hand in white, you might fade out the background and leave the product very strong, but make sure there's like a little thin black line around the outside of the product if you're going to cartoon it, because that will keep it in trim with everything else. Layer, flatten image, grab your image, bring it in, drop it into your board, and so on and so forth. If you hold down the Alt button, the ALT button, and you drag, you can actually copy, and when you let go, you can drag again, and you can just copy images over, right? Auto select, you can grab an image here, hold down Alt, right, and you can copy stuff. You don't need to do this with your storyboard, obviously, because that would be a bit pointless. But yeah, just a technique. When you've got your images that you want, if you go to the one here, you see you've got this black line around this one that we put before. If you right click on that and go to copy layer style, I can then click layer 2, hold down shift, click all of them, right click and go paste layer style, and it will black line all of them all around the outside. I can then hide the guides, so I can go to View, Show Guides, I can click that off so they disappear like this, and then I might say that these are a little bit too big, right? I think they're all a bit too large, so I'll click the top one, hold down Shift, click the bottom one, so they're all grouped, Edit, Free Transform, so it's grouping all of them, and I'll hold down Shift and maybe just adjust the size of them a little bit, just a little bit down there, till they get sort of something that's nicely balanced on the board, right? Click OK, and click any one of them to deselect the others. Now Photoshop automatically lines things up for you, which it should do anyway. If we go to, you see it says Snap here, if Snap is turned on, it'll automatically line things up to something else. So we'll hide the rulers for now. If I move this up slightly, right, because Snap is turned on in here, right, if I grab this now, auto select is on, if I move that up, it will sort of lock onto it. See, it locks on, and it also works out the bottom. So I can move all of these around and sort of find the place for them I like. I can nudge that along a little bit, then this one should lock to that. Yeah, I think that's good. And then I might move this one down, I might move this one down, this one here, and this one here. So that's my storyboard. And then I might decide that I want to have something behind that that pops it out. So I come down to the bottom layer and I choose New Layer, and I go back to the Marquee tool, and I'm just going to put a box of some kind behind that, and we can fill that with a colour. You can do a gradient or whatever you want. You don't have to do a strip like this to make this pop out. It's just one way, and I'm doing it to sort of tie these together so you can see that they're part of a set of 4, right? So I might go to the paintbrush, I might drop that on there, deselect it. I might make that a little bit smaller. I don't think the colour really works, but you know, we'll see. I might move it up a little bit. It's about here. Enter, and we'll just shift that along. Like that. I might drop the opacity down a little bit, sort of fade it out, just so it's not so strong, so it's not intrusive on the images. You just want something really just to sort of like give them a bit of a push out of the page. Now I can hold down the ALT button again, and I can copy that over. Put another one down there, right? And then if I had a logo, let's say it was a Sabi project, I might have my little Sabi logo down in the bottom corner down here, you know, or I might have my trim along the bottom. It's just for you to balance it out. If you're talking about the steps of what happens in each step, which is obviously useful, you might want to get the T tool for text, and you might want to put a little bit of text in there. You want to make the size of the text quite small to start with, and I'd say number 1, and I'd say this is like, you know, right, coffee stuff, right, for example. Right, so I'll just put coffee stuff set up for now. That'll do. And I sort of move that around a little bit like this. Now your text really needs to be black, so if you highlight all of the text, just go back to colours like this. That's your coffee stuff set up. Right, I think the text is dreadful. That doesn't really work. The typeface is really poor, so we're going to go back to Arial for now because that's pretty standard, and we might go for bold. Right, that's better. So, and then you move all your way through. If you hold down Alt and then Shift, you can actually move things quite, you can move things in a square straight line. So now I would obviously do number 2, number 3, I'd set these up first, I'd line them all up, and then you can get the T tool and go back in and change them. So this one now might be number 2, and this is Phil Kettle, for example. To rim, yeah, like that, and then number 3, number 4, number 5, and then obviously the last one you'd have would be number 8, and that would be drink tea, wouldn't it, or drink coffee. So that'd be 8, drink coffee, right? That's it. So that's a basic storyboard setup. It's pretty boring, pretty dull, but that's kind of how you do it. How creative you are with these and how much artistic flair you put into them is really important, but storyboards are essential for explaining what stuff does, and without them it's very, very hard to communicate your projects to anybody. You've got to remember that when people look at your work for the first time, they have no idea what it's about. It's really important that you do this kind of thing. What I was also going to say to you on the last video, which I'll just close these down because it's eating up my memory of my computer. We'll close this down. I don't need this anymore, so that can go. And we'll close this one down as well. Close that. Don't save. Brilliant. Now, if I come back to, where's the sketch gone? Let's have a look. If I go back to open here, and if I look at this one here, this is a nice sketch, right? This is how I tend to draw. I tend to sort of try and create like a bit of a story on my page. But if you had a page like this, there's nothing to stop you making a storyboard from that. So what we could do is you could, for example, if you were to make a new board from this, right, so if I just selected all of that and filled that with black, copy, file, new, right, these aren't the right sort of pixel dimensions for a new page, by the way. I'm just sort of using this to set up a board like I've done with the square before. Now what you could do is you can actually use this as a storyboarding technique. So let's say you had five squares you wanted to have a storyboard on this page, and you could have sketches top and bottom as well. But let's say you wanted to have sort of 5 squares, maybe have one here, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just do 4 for now, right? So yet again, this is a new layer on this board, and I'll fill that with black, copy, new, and that becomes the board square that we're going to use, like this. Right, and we'll delete this, we don't need this anymore. Now if I take this sketch and drag that into here, right, that's come through really big. But what we can start to do is think about how we can use some of these sketches in here to make storyboards. Right, so actually that's not working. So Control T, make it smaller by about 50%. Let's see what that's like. So the first image we could have used, if the first part of the storyboard was, say, this one here in the hand, right? So we'll come down to that. So I'd say this could be storyboard number 1, right, for example. Right, so then I can go layer, flatten image, and I can drag that into the board here. Right, that's 1. And then I can go edit, undo, so it's not flattened anymore. Let's have a look. The next one could be where you're plugging this in. That could be a nice image, right? So then I come through to this. And I need to make this a little bit smaller. So we'd make that to about 80%. Yeah, that's not bad. Like that. Move this down, we can tip it slightly. So it shows that happening, right? Layer, flatten image, drag that in. That's the second one. We'll go back here, edit, undo, step back again, and then we'll have a look at this. And this is quite nice here. How this could be step 3 is in the bottom right hand corner. So that could show a detail of how that plugs in. So we can make that a little bit smaller to fit that in. So all I'm really doing is I'm using an existing page of sketches to create like a nice storyboard from, like that. Step 3, sorry. Edit, step backwards, and make this smaller, like that here. That layer, flatten image, drag that in. That's that one. That shows that's gone in now. Right. Edit, step backwards, step back again, and let's have a look. That's gone in, and then we can maybe have some swiping action to show the hand swiping across it. So we come back down to this bit here. We'll try and get both of them in there because that's quite nice. if we can. Yeah, that's good. Right, layer, flatten image, and then we can drag that into there as well. That's another one. And lastly, we could just make out that he's kind of using the phone now, so that's that one in the thumb. So we're going to go back, edit, step backwards, step back again. There, that's quite nice, right? So layer, flatten image, and we'll drag that through. Now I haven't really worked that out properly because these are all a little bit oversized. So what I can do is 1, 2, 3. There's 6 of them exactly, isn't there? So we can do this one here. Have this auto select on, like that. We can turn on rulers by Control and R, Command and R. We can drop a line down like that. Then I can select this, and we can bring another ruler down here, and we can grab this one, and then this one, and then this one, like that. Now these all should start to match up now. So I can pick this one, double click it, we'll choose a stroke like that. That's black, but we could choose the colour. We could pick the colour that matches the blue. So we could pick a colour like that, which is kind of nicer, it's a bit softer. We can make it a little bit darker, so it just helps that to stand out. Then we can right click, copy layer style, and then we hold down shift and select them all, right click and paste layer style, like this. And then basically we've got a very basic storyboard here. Deselect them and move them all around a bit, line them all up like that. So you can take a page of sketches really and just show how storyboarding can actually sort of take a user through. And then if you were to kind of add a couple more bits and pieces in there, you might sort of put a little trim in the background like this, and you might use that colour that we used before. So we're going to hold down Alt to pick the colour again, this one, fill it, drop the opacity down a little bit to sort of bump it out, deselect, and then hide the layers, hold down Alt again, choose a pointer, hold down Alt, and you can drag that down like that. Yeah, hold that. You can make that a bit longer. That one, make that a bit longer, like that. So there you go. Basic storyboard just from a load of sketches, but it's nice. It looks good, and if you put a little logo on there, you have a nice little logo in the corner down here, a little bit of text. It just takes you through the process. So when you're actually setting your sketch page out, if you don't set your page out in a way you want, it doesn't mean that you then can't cut that page up and use it like this. I think what we'll do in terms of rendering the Sabi product, we'll do that in a different video because this one's been quite long. I don't want my computer to crash again like I did before. So don't forget to keep saving your work as you're working. I haven't been because it crashed my computer when I tried to save it, so I'll leave that as it is. But that's a nice way, if you haven't drawn your sketch page like this, which you should be doing like this with annotations and how you set things out, you can always then take that and cut that and then and build it this way. Another thing is, if you do have blue sketches, there's nothing to stop you turning them black, or if you have black sketches, nothing to stop you turning them blue. It's gone again, look, there we go. So I will resume that and we will just save the video and then do something another time. So that's it, all good. Nice one, and I will do another video later on. Cheers.